you guys doing? Hope you had a blast. Hope your day was good. How you guys doing? Hello guys. I want to have take some time again and have a great conversation today as always. So I'm just trying to set up everything before we kickstart. How are you guys doing? How's life been lately? Hope it is working as planned. All right, just getting this a little bit set up. Okay, I think we're almost there. Friends, tonight I want to ask you something, really. I I want to ask you something tonight. And I want you to sit with it before you answer. Okay, I want you to actually think about it for a while before you answer. What is your biggest regret? What is your biggest regret? I don't mean the surface one, not the socially acceptable one, the one that sounds reflective without being too raw. No, not that one. I mean the real one, the one you return to at night, the one that shows up uninvited on a Tuesday afternoon, the one that sounds like a specific number of years, maybe 10 years of depression, 8 years in the wrong career, 5 years in a wrong relationship, 3 years where you were so close to who you could have been and you let it slip away. What is your biggest regret? I know someone in this room tonight is carrying that weight, not as a concept, as a sentence you've spoken to yourself more times than you can count. You must have found yourself saying, "Oh, I wasted those years." Tonight, I want to challenge that sentence. I don't want to dismiss it. I don't want to minimize it because it happened. And I don't want to offer you a motivational quote in a font over a sunset and call it healing. No. I want to challenge the assumption buried inside that sentence. The assumption that those years, the one that feels like loss to you, were in fact lost. Because the question now becomes, what if they weren't? What if the detour that was not actually a deviation from the story, but the chapter the rest of the story depends on? What if your biggest regret is not evidence of a wasted life, but the most important preparation for the life that is still ahead? Tonight, we're going to find out. Thank you for joining us. Please let us know where you're joining from. Thank you so much. We appreciate it. And welcome to Build for More. My name is Matt Miller, as usual, and tonight we'll talk about regret. Not to survive it. Hey, I'm in Canada. What about you? Not to survive regret, to redeem it. To redeem it. So let's begin. Here's the lie that regret is telling you. Oh, Indonesia, thanks so much for joining. What time is it now Indonesia? Here's the lie that regret is telling you. It is telling you that time is a straight line, that life runs on a schedule, that there are windows, specific, narrow, unforgiving windows. And if you're not ready when the windows was open, you missed it. Okay, thanks for letting me know that. Thank you. Appreciate it. It is telling you that the person who took the straightest line, who made the right choices early, who did not detour, who did not risk anything, who did not collapse, who did not lose years to circumstances you did, or did not choose, whether circumstances you choose or you did not choose, or mistake you could not make again, that person is further than you. And the gap between you and them is permanent. Man, that's a lie. That is a lie. And it's a compelling one because it uses evidence. It points to real things, real years you've wasted, real opportunities you've missed, real moments where the window was open and you were not ready. But here's what the lie doesn't tell you. It does not tell you what you were doing in those years that you felt you wasted. The lie does not tell you what you were doing then. Not what it looked like during, like from the outside, like, but what was actually happening in the inside, in the places where no one can see, in the places you could not have articulated at the time. Because, see, some of the most significant formation of a human life happens in seasons that looks from the outside like nothing, like stagnation, like failure, like a wasted window. And here's the thing about formation, my friends. Formation doesn't announce itself. It does not issue a report. It does not send you a notification that says something important is being built in you right now. It just builds in the background. It builds quietly in the dark. In the seasons you would not have chosen, it builds. In the years you are most tempted to grieve, it builds. Tonight, I want to ask you a different question, my friend. Not, why did I lose those years? But what I want to ask you is, what did those years build in me that nothing else could have? What did I learn in those years? Thank you so much for subbing. What did I learn in those years? Those years that looked like I was drifting away, what did I learn? Not, why did the detour happen? Why did I move away from my plan? But what does the detour know that the straight road ahead would never have taught me? So if I had followed the straight plan, the straight road, what is it that this detour that I took taught me that was never going to be learned on the straight line? These are different questions, and they produce a different life. Let me show you what I mean. I want to tell you about Maya. Maya lost her 20s, okay? All her years of her 20s, she lost it. So that's how she described it. Not carelessly, not with detachment, with the specific grief of a person who has sat with a sentence for a long time. She said, I lost my 20s. Depression arrived for Maya at 19. Not dramatically, not all at once, The way fog arrives, fog, the way fog arrives. So gradually, that by the time you even realize what is happening, you can't even see anymore, right? You no longer remember what it looked like when you could. Maya functioned, she became functional. That is important to understand. She went to school, she held jobs, she maintained from the outside, she maintained a life that looked like a life. But on the inside, there was a distance between her and everything she was doing. A glass wall between Maya and her own existence. She said to me, I kept waiting to feel present. I kept waiting for the moment when the life I was living would actually feel like mine. And the moment became the decade. The waiting became the decade. She reached her early 30s and the fog began to lift. Not because of a single moment, though, because of the accumulated weight of choosing, day after day, the direction of healing over the comfort of avoidance. And when the fog lifted, when she emerged from the decade she had called lost, she did the accounting. She sat down honestly and she counted what the decade had lost. The relationships she had kept at arm's length, the opportunities she has not been well enough to take, the version of herself she had glimpsed but did not she was not able to sustain. She counted all of it, all the lost. And the number was real. And it hurts because it was 10 years, a whole decade, her 20s. And she let it hurt. She grieved it. And then something else happened to her. She started working with people in a professional capacity, yes. But I'm talking about something less formal than that. She started being present with people in pain. And she discovered something about herself that she had never known before. She could sit in rooms that other people couldn't sit in. She could sit with someone in the fog. She could sit with someone in their pain, with someone behind the glass wall, and she would not flinch. She would not recoil. She will not offer the easy comfort that communicates, I need you to be okay so I can stop feeling uncomfortable. She could just be there fully with herself without needing the person in front of her to perform recovery for her benefit. And the people she sat with felt it. They felt the difference between someone who had read about the fog and someone who had lived in the fog for a decade and found their way out of it. She said, I used to think the depression was the thing that happened to me before my real life started. And then I realized it was part of the curriculum, it was part of my package. It was what qualified me for the work I was actually here to do. Every person I have been able to reach in that place, I could only reach them because I had been there. Not a version of there, but I have actually gone through what they are going through. The decade she called lost was the decade that built the most essential thing she carried into her purpose. The detour was not the interruption, the detour was the preparation. And I want to say something carefully here tonight. I'm not telling you that the depression was good. No, that's not the point. I'm not telling you the loss was worth it in a way that minimizes what it cost. No. What I'm telling you is this: what happened to you, whatever the decade was, whatever the year was, did not only take from you, it also gave you. Whether you consent to the giving or not, whether you recognize the curriculum at the time or not, it built things in you. Quiet things. Things that do not show up in a resume or on an highlight reel. Things that shows up when you sit across from someone in pain. Things that shows up when the room gets hard and everyone else walks away. Things that shows up exactly when they are needed, in exactly the form that only your specific journey could have produced. Your decade was not a waiting room, my friend. It was a workshop. It was a workshop. You were learning from it. You were being formed. So it is not a loss. That detour you took, that time of your life, is not a loss. You learned something from it. Let me give you a framework tonight, because I believe that most of us are reading our regrets incorrectly. Not because we were wrong about what happened. No, we're not wrong, but because we're using the wrong lens. We're viewing our regrets from the wrong perspective. We are reading regret as a verdict when it is usually and actually is a compass. It's not a verdict. Let me give you three lenses, three ways of seeing what the regret is actually telling you. That mistake you made in your life, three ways of seeing what that mistake is actually telling you. And I want you to hold all three of them, not just the one that feels more comfortable, all three. The first lens: regret is a compass, not a verdict. Here's what a verdict does. A verdict looks at the evidence, the years, the choices you made or the choices you did not make, the circumstances, and it renders a conclusion. The conclusion is always you're guilty, or you're wasted, or you're behind, or you're irredeemable. All right? And most of us have been living there. We've been living under a verdict for a very long time, for years. Some of us have been living under a verdict for decades, carrying the sentence as though someone of authority handed it down on us, as if a judge in the law court sentenced us because we made a mistake. But listen to me, friend. The regret did not come from a judge. It came from your values. That is what regret actually is. Regret is the signal that arises when the life you lived did not match the values you carry. And that means if you feel regret, you know what you value. Not theoretically. You literally know what you value. In the very specific, in the painful way that only real laws can teach. The person who feels no regret at all about a wasted decade, about a wasted 5 years, does not deeply value what was lost. But if you feel regret over a wasted period, it means you do value it. You do value the time that you lost. The fact that it hurts, the fact that the years still weigh something, is proof that what you were reaching for was real. Regret is not a verdict on the past. It's a compass pointing towards the future. It is telling you, hey, dude, here, this is what matters. This is worth building. Go this direction. The question is not, why did I lose this? No. The question is, now that I know what I value, what do I build? What do I build? The second lens, I said I'm going to show you three lenses. The second lens, Adema baby said, remember me? I can't really tell, sorry. I can't. But you can remind me. Lens number two, though. Regret is a curriculum, not a detour. Regret is a curriculum, not a detour. We talked about this in a previous talk we had one of the previous nights. Every season of your life is qualified to teach you something that no other season can. Every season of your life is qualified to teach you something that no other season can. The season of waiting teaches patience that success cannot. The season of loss teaches compassion that comfort cannot. The season of failure teaches resilience that achievement cannot. And the decade you are calling wasted, the decade you are calling lost, that season had a curriculum. And it's not because someone designed it for your benefit, not because the suffering was planned, but because you were living or you were alive in it. You were alive in that season. And alive people cannot not learn. They are always learning. Even in the seasons we will not choose. Even in the years that felt like nothing, that felt like we made the whole mistake, that felt like we are on the wrong path. Something was being processed still. Something was being metabolized. Something was being stored that you will spend the rest of your life drawing from, tapping from. The question is not, what did I miss while I was in that season? No. The question is, what did that season teach me that I could not have learned any other way? Ask it honestly, my friends. Not as a comfort, no. As a genuine inquiry. Because the answer, the real, specific, honest answer is the beginning of the redemption of those years. Lens number three, the third lens. Regret is a title deed, not a receipt for something lost. See, you paid for those years. Let me say that differently. You did not lose those years and walk away empty-handed. You paid for something. The cost was real. The years, the pains, the specific grief of what could have been, the cost was real. But so is what you purchased. The person who walked through depression for a decade purchased an understanding of the human soul that no classroom can provide. The person who spent years in the wrong career purchased the obsolete, unshakable clarity of knowing exactly what they were not built for. That is the other side of knowing exactly what they were built for, right? The person who lost years to the wrong relationship, the wrong city, the wrong version of themselves, purchased the specific embodied knowledge of what does not fit, which is the beginning of finding what does, what fits. You did not leave those years empty handed, my friends. You did not leave those years empty handed. No. A thousand times, no, you did not leave those years empty handed. You carry something from them. You earned something from them, from those years that you thought you wasted. You earned something from them. Something that cannot be taught, something that cannot be inherited, something that cannot be borrowed from somebody else's journey. It is your journey and you learned from it. A title deed. Your name on it. It's your name. You experienced it and you paid in full. 3 lenses I gave you. Regret as a compass. Regret as a curriculum. Regret as a title deed. Look at your season through all of these. Look at that life you thought you wasted, that decade you thought you wasted through all of these lenses. Look at that year you thought you wasted, that 5 years, that 20 years you thought you wasted, that 2 years, that 3 months. Look at them through all of this. And tell me, honestly, if it still looks like loss. I tell you the fact. If you look at the wasted years through these lenses, you will agree with me that you didn't lose those years. Those years were not wasted, actually. They were years of learning. And you learned something from it if you are true to yourself. Let me tell you about James. James spent 11 years in a career he was not built for. Not 11 months, 11 years doing something he wasn't built for at all. He had entered it practically, like most of us, out of college, out of university. You just took the next available job. You entered it not with passion, but just with pragmatism. The same thing with James. He entered it not with passion, but with pragmatism. It was a stable career. It paid the bills. It satisfied a certain set of expectations. His expectation and other people's expectation. So what happened? He stayed. He remained in the career year after year, building competence in something that never once in 11 years felt like ease. James said, I wasn't miserable the whole time. I want to say that clearly. There are very good seasons in that 11 years too. There were things I was genuinely good at in that 11 years. But there was always this low grade awareness, like a sound you cannot quietly place it, that I was performing someone else's life. That was what he said. He said, I was performing someone else's life. I wasn't living my life for these 11 years in this role. Now, in his late 30s, something shifted in James. A door opened, unexpected. He didn't prepare for it. In a completely different direction. A direction that, if you had told him 10 years earlier, he would not have been able to explain why it mattered to him. Because 10 years earlier, it didn't matter to him. It didn't mean anything to him. He took the door with significant cost, though, with a kind of financial and social disruption that makes everyone around you nervous. And with the specific weight of a man who looked back at 11 years and asked the question he had been afraid to ask. Was all of that 11 years for nothing? The same thing with some of you that are in a career that is not, it's not yours, it's not something you love. You spend 5 years, but the career pays the bill. So you're like, hey, Matt, the bill gets paid, man. I get the bill paid, but what I'm doing doesn't look like me. This is not what I love. This is not what I want to do. But the bill gets paid. Now, for you, these years you're putting in, it is not waste. That years is teaching you something else, something you wouldn't have learned if you had gone the route you planned. That's what James is also going through here. James looked back at the 11 years he spent in this career, in this role, and he said, was all that for nothing? He spent time with that question, honestly, looking at it, not rushing past it with optimism. No, not drowning it either, just sitting down with it. And then something happened to James. He started doing the new work. And he began to notice gradually and unmistakably that the 11 years he had called wasted, the 11 years he had called wrong, those were quietly, consistently, undeniably showing up as fuel for him in this new role. The systems thinking he had learned in the wrong career for 11 years was now the thing that set him apart in the right one. The specific understanding of how organizations make decisions, all this he earned through years of watching it from the wrong side. This was now the lens no one in the room had apart from him. The discipline of showing up professionally day by day to something that did not energize him had built a consistency in him that people who are taking the easy road never have to develop. And James said, the 11 years were not a detour from my story. They were the research. I just didn't know the thesis as at that time. Every single thing I learned in those years, even the things I learned about what doesn't work and what works, I use them now. Not sometimes, I use them now constantly. The 11 years, friends, is the research. What if the year you're calling, or the years you're calling wrong, were research for a thesis you haven't written yet? What if that wrong career, the wrong relationship, the wrong city, the wrong decade was not a deviation from your purpose, but the accumulation of raw material your purpose requires? What if you're not behind? What if you are equipped? Those years that you thought were wasted, they were years of equipping you. You were learning specific set of tools, and you were forged in very specific set of fires. Because see, you find yourself in new places, in new roles, in new doors, in new rooms where nobody else has gone through the fire you've gone through. Nobody understands what you understand because they don't have the skill, because they didn't go through what you went through. They did not pay what you paid. They do not carry what you carried. James told me one more thing. He said, I stopped calling those 11 years a mistake the day I realized I could not do what I do now without them. Not a different version of it. This specific version, the one that actually helps people. That version required all the 11 years, every single one. Every single one. What are you going through that you're thinking is a waste? What years of your life are you thinking, oh, this is not what I planned? I just found myself here accidentally, and you're thinking this is a waste. Friends, I'm here to tell you tonight, it is not a waste. Look at it through the right lens. Because it's not on the straight road that you have planned, doesn't mean the detour is a waste. Once you detour, what is that detour showing you? What is it teaching you that you will never learn on the straight road? Friends, let me give you the practical part. As always on my channel, we always do the practical piece. Because understanding regret differently is one thing. Choosing to live differently because of that understanding, that is another thing. And that is what tonight is actually about. Three things. Three things you need to stop doing with the regrets you have, starting today. The first thing, stop counting what you lost. Start counting what you carry, what you learned. You have been doing an accounting for months, maybe years. And the accounting has always been going in one direction. What I missed, what I should have done, what the person who did not take my detour has that I do not have. That accounting is real. I'm not downplaying it. It's real. I'm not telling you to pretend the losses were not losses. But it is incomplete. That's what I'm saying. It is incomplete. Because on the other side of the ledger, there's everything those years built. The empathy, the resilience, the specific embodied hard-won knowledge that only comes from the path you actually walked. The depth that comfort does not produce. The compassion that success does not teach. Count that too. Not instead of the losses, in addition to the losses. Because a complete accounting changes the verdict. And you deserve a complete accounting. The second thing I said I'll give, stop comparing your chapter 5 to somebody else's chapter 20. You know what I mean. You know what I mean. The person who took the straight road, the person who started early, who stayed consistent, did not detour. The one you measure yourself against. The one whose chapter 20 you can see clearly. While your chapter 5 feels like the beginning. Listen to me, my friend. You're not reading the same book. Their chapter 20 was written on a different foundation. with a different material towards a different destination. And the thing about your own book, the one you're still writing, is that chapter 5 for you carries everything from the years before the first chapter. The years that looked like nothing was happening. The years that were actually the prologue. The prologue is not wasted pages. The prologue is what makes the rest of the story make sense. Stop reading someone else's chapter 20 and call it a mirror. It is not your mirror. It is someone else's story. Yours is still being written. All the chapters ahead are only possible because of the pages already written behind you. All of them. Even the ones you wish you could remove. All of them. So the third item, and this is the one I want you to hold tonight. Stop waiting for the detour to become a straight road. Because it will not. The detour was not a temporary inconvenience on the way to the real path. The detour is the real path. The road you actually walked, the road you actually took, with all its wrong turns, with all its unexpected seasons, its years that looked like nothing. That is your road. Not the road you should have walked, the straight road you thought you should have taken. Not the road somebody else is walking. Your personal road, the road you walked, the road, the detour, and the destination it is leading you to. That destination is one that can only be reached from that detour, from this exact position you find yourself today, carrying this exact weight, with these exact tools. Friend, you are not a person who took the wrong road and now needs to find the right one. No, you are a person who walked the only road you had to walk. And you're now arriving at the place that road alone could bring you to. Stop counting what you lost. Stop comparing your chapter to someone else's chapter. Stop waiting for the detour to end, because that detour is your road. Walk it. With your whole self, walk it. Because the road knows where it is going. Even when you cannot see it yet, the road knows where it is going. I want to tell you something. There's a year in my life I've called more times than I can count. I've called it wasted. I want to be specific tonight, because I think specificity is what this room needs. And I like to be truthful to the people I talk to on this channel. Not a vague reference to difficulty, no. A real year for me, a real sentence. There was a year when I'd made a significant decision, a decision I believed in, a decision that had real sacrifice, the kind with a real price tag. Relationship adjusted because of it. Finances got disrupted because of it. The version of myself that other people expected quietly retired because of it. And I made the decision, and I walked into the year that followed, expecting, not early, but eventually, for the decision to justify myself, for the sacrifice to produce something visible, for the outside of my life to begin to match the conviction on the inside. Friends, it did not. I'll tell you the truth. It did not. The year rolled by, and I was in the same place I had been before. No change. Same circumstance, same view from the same window, same gap between vision and reality. And I did the accounting like every one of you will do. I counted what the year had lost, what the year had cost me, and I came up short. All right, I came up short because I took a plan. I made a plan that was not the right one. I thought as at that time. I want to tell you what happened in the year after that. Not in the big dramatic sense, but in the quiet sense. In the sense of a man still sitting still enough to actually look at what he was carrying. I started writing differently in that year. Not better in the technical sense, but more honestly, I became more specifically with a precision about human pain that I had never before had. Because I was in it, I was feeling it. I wasn't managing it from a distance, I wasn't reading about it. No, I was walking through it, I was actually in it, neck deep. I started connecting with people differently, not with the confidence of someone who had the answers, but with the presence of someone who understood the question from the inside. And slowly, not with a trumpet, not with a moment I can point to, I began to recognize something. The year I had called wasted was the year my voice found its trust register. The message I carry, the specific version of it that reaches people, was formed in that year I tried to write off. I do not say this easily. I do not say it as a tidy bow on a messy season. If I could have chosen, I would not have chosen that year. But I'm standing here tonight, carrying something I would not have had, saying things I could not have said, reaching people I could not have reached if that year had gone the way I planned. And I want to give you that. Not the suffering, the reframe. Your biggest regret, the season, the years, the decade, the specific weight you carry in here tonight, is not the evidence that your story went wrong. It is the evidence that your story went deep. And deep stories are the ones that last. Deep stories are the ones that touches people, that reaches people. Deep stories are the ones 20 years from now, someone will still tell something about it, and it will still change them. Not the surface story, not the acceptable story, not the straight road stories. The ones that went into the dark and came out carrying something. Your story is one of those, if you let it be. Before I let you go tonight, one thing. Tonight, I want you to write down one sentence, not a paragraph, not a manifesto, one sentence. Finish this sentence tonight. The season I called wasted actually gave me, feel that. The season I called wasted actually gave me. What did the season give you? Write it down. Not for someone else, for yourself. Because here's what I know about the sacrifice, about that sentence. It exists. The blank is not empty. You may not have the words for it yet. You may need to sit with the question longer than tonight. That is allowed. But the answer is there. Somewhere in you, in the things you never understand that you did that you did before. In the depth you carry that comfort could not ever build. In the specific irreplaceable knowledge of someone who went there where they went and came back. Write the sentence down. Even if it's imperfect, even if it's provisional, just because see, the moment you begin to name what the sentence gave you, the verdict begins to lose its power. And the compass begins to speak, begin to point you in the right direction in the future. Friends, your biggest regret is not the final word on those years. It is the first word, the first honest word of a longer sentence. A sentence that continues like, and what it built in me, no other season could have. Believe that tonight, even if the belief is small, even if it's only the size of a sentence, especially even then, believe that tonight. If you've not subscribed to this channel, kindly subscribe to Build for More with Matt Miller for truth that will change your life. And if this message spoke to you tonight, please don't sit on it. If it resonated with you, don't sit on it. Share this stream tonight. Share it with someone else in your world. Share it with someone that is living from the angle of seeing those years that are wasted as wasted years. Because they need to hear this too. They need to hear it. The detour was not the interruption. The detour was the preparation. Thank you so much, friends, for your time. Thank you for your support. This is Matt Miller saying bye for now. And do have a great, great night rest or morning wherever you are. Thank you and peace out. I'll talk to you again tomorrow. Bye for now.